Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the cyber exchange world. We welcome you to what is the last session for day one on the cyber exchange. Hello, my name is Michael Castro, and I am moderating a fabulous conversation to end the day today on the topic of vCISOs. And, with me today, I have a great panel, all here to help everyone understand the whole topic of vCISOs. What are they? What is it all about? And really focus on what is the success and what are some of those success stories of being a vCISO. I am the founder of RiskAware. I'm a vCISO myself, and so hopefully between the three panelists and a little bit of myself, we'll be able to fill in all your questions and give you a good informed conversation. I want to take a moment to have each of the members introduce themselves, have them tell you a little bit about themselves, and really help you to understand them, and then we'll get right engaged. So Donna, ladies first, why don't we start with you?
All right, well, my name is Donna Gallaher, and I'm a virtual CISO in Atlanta, Georgia. And I started my business in about, about middle of 2018. And my kind of course to my career track to get to that point was I started in engineering and then got into sales and then technical sales and then got into IT, service delivery and managed services. And from there, I got into executive leadership in infrastructure and IT operations, and then transferred into security from there. I worked with some larger companies, Wipro, with Incom, with First Advantage, and with SunGard. And I guess the reason why I started is I had been at several companies for kind of a short tenure, which I think is common in our industry, but kind of got tired of the roller coaster. Being somewhere for a fairly short time, and either you've achieved compliance, you've achieved the goals, or there's some type of problem and there's a reduction in force, and then you're out looking for another job again. So I really want to spread out my own risk and maybe have more than one client, and be able to kind of serve as an advisor. Another thing I saw, just not so much with me, but with some of my peers, was I felt a lot of them were being pressured to sign off on things that they didn't really feel comfortable with, or they weren't put in a position in the organization where they had enough clout in order to really impact the change. So with those kind of things coming together, I decided I think it would be better to start my own business, and I'm really happy I did.
Fantastic, fantastic, great, Donna, thank you. Farooq, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. I think Michael already introduced me, so I'll go into the details about my name. So, name is Farooq Naiyer. I currently work for this company called Orion, which is a not-for-profit research and education network for the province of Ontario in Canada. And my role over here is dual-fold. I mean, I'm the CISO for Orion, but apart from that, I'm also a virtual CISO for about 14 universities and 16 colleges in Ontario. And we run a program called OnCheck, known as Ontario Cybersecurity Higher Education Consortium. Have experience of more than 19 years now. Have prior to joining Orion, I used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, as part of their payment card security practice, and I was serving clients all across North America. Before that, I was out west in the prairies working for one of the retail giant. I've also had the privilege of working for the BC Lottery Corporation, and I've previously worked for the financial sector too. So experience is a bit of a mixed bag. I've been in the field of audit and compliance, security leadership, security compliance, but of all this experience I've had so far, I really am enjoying my role as a virtual CISO and shared CISO, and we'll talk about that in detail.
Fantastic, fantastic, and thanks for being here. Mr. Ball, over to you.
Okay, Michael Ball, and I'm the founder of Team CISO, so another virtual CISO company. I started my career probably about 30 years ago, 31 years ago, and was the first CISO at Aviva Canada insurance company. And from there moved over to Manulife. And so I spent just about a decade with Manulife in the security governance, stood up the practice of the CISO, but was not CISO myself. Working with them, working with auditors, working with our supply chain, and about 5 years ago realized that significant portion of what I was doing at Manulife was working with our supply chain small business partners in protecting or putting together their program to protect my data, my information, and figured that, you know what, that probably what I want to do is just leave and start my own business doing that, working the supply chain and providing governance.
Fantastic. So each of you, thank you, by the way, to all of you, each of you has a story. And it is an interesting story because I think each of you, and myself included, have had a journey where that journey has started in corporate world, has started in a zone of really helping enterprises primarily with that cyber requirement. But of course, not every organization can afford a full-time CISO. You know, we look at numbers, you know, close to 250,000+ per year to get a good qualified CISO into an organization. And that can have its challenges, especially for the smaller organizations. You know, smaller organizations, the non-for-profits, and of course, you know, in Farooq's case, you know, the education system and higher education system. So Donna, I know you touched on this a bit, and I want to go back to you. Really tell me what really compelled you, if you can expand a bit, what really compelled you to make that shift? What is it that really inspires you to be, you know, this virtual CISO? And you know, we'll call it vCISO through this conversation, but of course we're talking about a virtual CISO, also known as fractional. But really, you know, by definition, we're talking out of a CISO capability in a smaller, more compact model. But anyways, Donna, over to you. What really was that big shift for you?
Well, I guess the light bulb went on when I started getting into some data privacy. So I got certified in European data privacy for GDPR, and there's an Article 38 in GDPR which says there's got to be independence. You know, that the data, the TPO, they've got to have, you know, resources to do their job, and they can't have people interfering with how they do their job, and they can't be fired for doing their job. So there are all of these things that they wrote into that law that said, you know, that makes sense for the CISO too. And I could just see in posting after posting, you know, in looking for full-time jobs, where they were all really set up the same way. You know, there was no guarantee they were going to listen to you, or there was no guarantee somebody was going to, you know, force you to, you know, sign off on something you weren't comfortable with, or you weren't going to be set up to fail, or, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever the conflicts were, and that you were kind of the scapegoat. I just saw that a lot, where the CISO was the person who was going to take the dart, you know, if something happened and you're the one who gets fired. And I'm like, well, that's not right. You know, if you really want your organization to be accountable for their decisions, and you're really trying to decentralize the role of the security officer out into the business, you know, you have to educate the business units and make them accountable for their own decisions. And I don't see that as long as there's any way for them to blame an internal person as the scapegoat, that was ever going to happen. So I said, I think the future really is going to be an external advisor or an external executive level, similar to a general counsel or an external auditor, who's really going to tell you the truth. And you can choose to listen, you can choose not to listen, but ultimately, you know, that business leader is going to need to look in the mirror and be accountable for his decisions or her decisions.
And you get paid either way.
Yep. And you know, the other things there is also contributing is just the liability associated with it. I mean, we've seen recent headlines now with CISOs being indicted, you know, of either covering or not acting appropriately. And I didn't want to go down that road, so there's no liability for you if you're generally not considered a director and officer of the company as the CISO. So does the company's legal protections, even cover you? Whereas if I'm an independent, virtual CISO, I can, write my own liability policy, and I can protect myself in my contract language, and I don't have those protections as a full-time employee in an enterprise.
Great, great. Farooq, you mentioned that you have like
Taking
40
notes.
40 clients. Like, you really, take the model of a vCISO, quite large in the sense that you're providing, 1/40th of you to each of and every one of your clients. Like, how did you go from saying, hey, I'm going to help one organization or a handful to this model where you are, really being that cyber person for such a large group?
Michael, this journey started off as a pilot with just about 8 institutions. And the purpose of running that pilot was to answer the question that, okay, how can we actually manage time between that one virtual CISO and those 8 institutions? And I think, in all honesty, I think, uh, so we had an oversight board of the CIOs of the universities and colleges who were actually trying to figure out the problem they were trying to solve first. I mean, they all knew that they had like lots of cyber threats in the higher education space. Universities and colleges were getting hit by ransomwares and breaches and having all these things. But I think in the first 2 to 3 months, what we did was we tried to figure out the problem that we're trying to solve. Okay. And then also figure out the service model. Because I mean, at the end of the day, to Donna's point, the role of a virtual CISO slash a shared CISO is more of an advisor. So the virtual CISO is working in an advisory capacity and does not have any operational or tactical responsibility, or for lack of a better word, doesn't even have any strategic responsibility. He's just advising the security personnel and the CIOs in one shape or form. So yeah. So what we did was that in the first 2 years, we had a pretty well-defined scope in which what we did was that we did a whole current state assessment of these institutions to find out what are their common weaknesses. Then we figured out the way forward in terms of what are the low-hanging fruits. What can we achieve in the next 2 years? Can we develop federated models for frameworks? Can we develop best practices? Can we develop proof of concepts around any other shared services? But the main thing was that, okay, what value does this shared CISO, virtual CISO bring to the table? And I think one of the things that the key stakeholders were able to figure out was that the problem that they were trying to solve was more around security thought leadership. They had security practitioners, they had technology leaders, but they did not have security leaders. And that's something that we figured out in the first 3 to 4 months. So that's the void we figured out that needs to be filled out. The other challenge was managing compliance requirements and a bunch of other things. So I won't go into the details, but I'll talk more about the scaled approach. How were we able to scale this up from 8 institutions to 29 institutions? So what we did was that we came up with a membership tier. So all the universities and colleges were part of that pilot were members who were contributing like a membership tier or annual membership. So what we did was that we came up with 3 membership tiers. So the first membership tier was like membership tier 1, in which all the participating institutions were entitled to participate in shared activities. Shared activity means if I'm running any working group calls or any webinars or any weekly calls or something, they would participate on that. Now, if they want one-on-one time with me, then they'll have to sign up for membership tier 2 or 3. So membership tier 2 is entitled to about 3 to 4 hours a month. And then membership tier 3 is entitled to about 6 hours a month. So we wanted to make sure that we come up with a service model which is scalable and sustainable at the same time. And then what we did was that we brought in a whole project management team to work with me to make sure that they're able to manage all the deliverables and all the commitments. So In short, that's the answer to it.
Fantastic. Now, Michael, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I think when we put our years together, we're both here in the Toronto area. We
Yep.
put our years together. I think we're homing in on like close to 60 years of experience between the two of us.
Yep.
And each of us has a different journey. I spent well over 20 years in the corporate world and providing those CISO levels. What really was your big drive? Like, you've been in that corporate world too, right? And your
Yeah.
focus in your organization really is on that small medium business. What really has driven you for that?
Well, and I touched on it earlier, is looking after the supply chain piece, where these businesses, mom and pop shops, up to kind of 200 employees, it's the soft underbelly of the corporate world. And so corporations have budget. They have individuals in certain security roles, operational roles, governance roles. They have tooling. They know what they're doing. They've built their defense in depth, but then they rely on these vendors that have 5 and 10 and 15 people that have no budget for security, have no security awareness, no guidance, and really hold this soft spot access into the corporate world. So providing the guidance and the framework for those smaller companies has been kind of my bread and butter.
Fantastic. A great virtual CISO, of course, is one that has had that success in the security world and that senior leadership. Of course, many organizations, especially the non-for-profits and the smaller companies, really aren't able to tap into that until now. And that virtual model is really starting to grow, not only in security, but in the financial space,
Yep.
in the information and the IT space, and so many other areas where organizations, where we're seeing in Farooq's case, with Donna, and kind of being that step out where really there's value to these other organizations. What do you think, and Donna, I'll start with you. What do you think is really the driver for why an organization would want to go out and, seek or have consideration for a virtual model versus that traditional model and that traditional bench that exists today?
Well, I've been doing a lot of networking with boards of directors, and they are, cyber is definitely on their mind. They are accountable for the governance. And if you have a CISO who is, underneath the CEO and things are not working properly, then, you're kind of set it up where that CEO is going to be exposed. And the CEO might want us to press, reports to the board, or they, if they're really don't have their act together, that they can, really impact what that company is, the risk of that company. So I think, we're starting to see it more from the board level of, they really want someone to tell them the truth. And I actually had that experience with one of my first clients, where I heard, it was one of my network contacts. They said, no one's ever really come in and done an assessment for us. So I went in there, and this particular company had some safety concerns. And the CEO had kind of his agenda. He wanted to do some succession planning. There was a lot of legacy, like very loyal people to the company, and he thought that was their biggest risk. But when we started getting into some of the physical security aspects, we thought that there might be safety issues that might overshadow it. And some of it, when you saw how few controls there were around some of the safety things, that was going to make him look bad. So, he ended up saying, the company ended up saying, look, we appreciate what you're doing, but we need to terminate the contract. And I never really got a good answer for that. But you kind of put two and two together and say, how often is this going to happen? So, like I said, if you really want to know the truth, then I think that virtual CISO model works, and I think you're going to see it driven from the board.
Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic. Now, Farooq, of course, you're in an industry where, large budgets and capabilities in large teams just aren't in the mix, right? There can be very hallowed and very established organizations, but they're just not built to have, a team of 40 people that are, all with cybersecurity on the mindset, with a full-time leader to have that in. What really, compels them to have a model where, that vCISO, and is that something which that they, kind of embrace with open arms, or is it something that, they have taken a while to kind of see where that value has been in that model?
So in our case, I think it was different because the need for having a virtual CISO came from the community. So in this case, Orion didn't go to the community came to them. So they didn't have to sell this opportunity. They just wanted to make sure that Orion manages this in such a way that they are able to deliver. The second thing is that we are offering virtual CISO services to even institutions who have a CISO already. And that's one of the reasons why we renamed our program. We initially called this the Shared CISO program, but now it's known as the Ontario Cybersecurity Higher Education Consortium. And the reason for that is that at the end of the day, it's like I am driving the program, but there are other security leaders and CISOs who are also contributing back to the program. So without naming the institutions, I can tell you that perhaps all the 3 to 4 large universities in Ontario do have a full-time CISO. And one of the reasons why they are part of the program is, first of all, that they are contributing back to the community in some way, same show perform in terms of, the knowledge and experience they have, but also leveraging things they don't have. Like, for instance, compliance is a big challenge. Like I can tell you, PCI DSS compliance is a big challenge for higher education in Ontario. Apart from that, leveraging advice on breach response and best practices and things like those. Because at the end of the day, CISOs do need that uh, second set of ears just to validate things like those. So I think from our perspective, it has really worked out. And so the institutions who are part of it are fully vested into it. Let's just say that.
Great. Now, Michael, the small business so Farooq tells an excellent case, because of course, virtual CISOs aren't all about filling in a missing person on the bench. There are times where it truly is about governance and leadership and contributing to the team, and one of the things that I focus on, with my clients is really telling them that if the virtual CISO is really about being a part of the team. It's not about having a consultant and having someone, give guidance in a consulting kind of way. It is about, becoming embraced within, no matter what the size of the engagement. From your perspective, Michael, then, what are you seeing that really, makes that client, really see the value? What is it that, the ideal client per se is really getting out of a vCISO as they walk in the door?
Yeah. So we put together an entire program. So it's an automated or structured program that has, things like security awareness that goes out regularly. We look through their vulnerability reports and give them guidance on missing patches and that sort of thing. We oversee if they've got an MSSP in place. So hang on, I need to say this. Sorry. You cannot govern something that doesn't exist, right? So as a CISO, even for a small shop, either they have to have somebody stepping up and doing the IT security operations themselves, or they need to have an MSSP engaged that we govern over, or we will provide those services as a separate billable item. Things like patch management and backup and restore and incident management and vulnerability management and security awareness. These are all things that need to be going on in the background. So as part of our framework, we just put a cadence to that every week you're going to get a security awareness message. Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a vulnerability scan and the reports. Every quarter, you're going to get something rolled up to the executive that tells them their posture versus the previous quarter.
And that's vital, right? It definitely is. You have to look at it as a program, right? And that kind of leads to my next question. And Donna, I'm going to start with you on this one. There'll always be those clients, those ones that you get, the phone rings, someone has said, hey, I think I need some help here. I need some security. I've got some things that I need to get done. I've been told I need to do it. I need to check some boxes. So what really, how do you deal with those type of clients that really want to bring you in just for the sake of fulfilling some mandate or some perceived mandate? And, it's all about, as I said, checking off some requirements versus really tapping into the true value of a virtual CISO.
Well, we talked about that external model, and a lot of that gets solved with that. All right, you want just a compliance report? Okay, but I'm going to tell you really what the truth is, and you're going to be accountable for the decision. So as long as it's a much easier problem to manage as an external CISO than it is for being a CISO in an enterprise that just wants to go through a compliance exercise. So that's kind of the first thing I would say. But ultimately, it really depends what else is driving the longer term goals. I mean, it could be if there's just a weakness in the compliance function, or they need somebody to help with the remediation, and that's what they prioritize. As for the organization is to be able to say that they're compliant. That might be a great contract. I've also worked with companies where there was just a deficit of skill in a certain area, and they just needed some leadership to oversee, let's say, third-party risk management or their vulnerability program or their compliance program, whatever it is, that they just needed somebody who was senior, that knew what they were doing, knew how to lead a team, and just really needed somebody to drive just that one aspect of their program. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because somebody is focused on compliance that it can't be a successful relationship for both the company and the CISO.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, Farooq, when an organization, whether it be, from the model you have or the one that Donna has or Michael or even myself, when an organization engages a virtual CISO, what should they expect? What is it really, kind of going in the door that is going to be, that onboarding or that start to the process of, really helping them, be engaged and be successful?
So I think the first thing that we usually do in terms of onboarding institutions is making sure that so we run an annual security self-assessment exercise, and the reason for that is that we do so that there is a current state assessment of these institutions, and we are able to identify the areas which need attention, because security itself is overwhelming. You cannot fix everything in a matter of months or days. It can take years too, right? So I think the perspective that we have is more of a risk-based approach, making sure that we are able to identify the weaknesses, able to identify that, okay, are they high risk, medium risk, or low risk, and then coming up with a remediation plan which works for everybody. Because one of the things that we take into account is that we're working with a sector which is uh, short on resources, short on finances, and at the same time, they have to make sure that they're delivering too. So making sure that we're coming up with something which is practical, and also at the same time addressing the risks too. So the key message over here is having a risk-based approach, which is aligned with the objectives of the organization and with the ever-changing business requirements. I mean, higher education has been one of the hardest hit sectors when it comes to pandemic. I mean, we were forced into digital transformation in a matter of 48 hours, right? So for some institutions, it was like a giant leap of faith. I mean, we were dealing with faculty members who had never ever worked from home ever before. So I mean, all that changed over a period of few days. So yeah, we're dealing. So I think it comes down to managing expectations in a practical way with a risk-based approach.
Michael, I ask you the same kind of question. What have you seen in this space?
Boy. I'm going to defer for a second. I'm blanking. My apologies.
That's okay. I definitely, from my perspective, as you ponder on that, I found, obviously a lot of accountability belongs there, right? I think, what really drives organizations to consider a vCISO, and of course, that's assuming that they even understand what that is. But,
Yeah.
what drives them into thinking that is the whole concept of having that expertise immediately available to them. We look at a world right now with a very large supply and demand constraint with security professionals today, as there are far more jobs than there are experts in that field. The ability to attract and hold on to resources becomes difficult. And of course, some organizations then kind of bring in a more junior person or someone who's less experienced, where here's a model where, we look at the virtual CISO model, where someone who is well equipped, who is well experienced, who's been down that road in the trenches, is potentially immediately available to them. But of course, there has to be something to there, right? There is some lead-in time to build a model of learning. A virtual CISO really has to be capable of stepping in right away and getting to the crux of things and starting to build that model.
That
So,
leads into the interim CISO, right?
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
when somebody has announced their resignation or they've been terminated, we can go in as a virtual CISO, keep the ship floating for a period of time while they go look for the unicorn.
Mhm.
And
The
you
other
know that,
thing
yeah,
we want to mention while we're talking about the value of a CISO that I haven't heard anybody mention is just the strategy for risk mitigation. Because a lot of
Yeah,
times they're told, here's what we want you to do. All right. And,
right.
and you want to please your customer, and they say, well, maybe we can offer another suggestion for still reducing risk to an acceptable level without doing exactly what somebody is demanding them and pushing that client into doing. So
Right.
let's say, for example, it's a highly sensitive piece of software and 50 people have access to it. Well, do 50 people really need access to that, or can we reduce that to 5 or 7? Maybe we're not willing to accept the risk of 50 people, of 50 insiders having access to it. But if it's 5 to 7, maybe that's something that we can do. Or are there contract terms that we can put in,
Right.
that we're going to get reporting on? So only really an experienced leader, that's worked in security is going to know what the options are, that someone who's just going to react to, here's a checklist of things that you must do, or that we're going to demand of you, is just, if you just let those demands drive your program, you're really not going to be in control of it. And that's another value I think that a virtual CISO can bring, is to know when you can push back and suggest some alternative strategies for reducing that risk.
Yeah, I think it's important for organizations to see that, bringing in a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO isn't just about, another person. It is about, bringing that skill set and not just having that reactive piece. From my perspective, I see a lot of prospective clients who want to get engaged because they have a requirement from one of their customers, right? They have a vendor questionnaire, they have some regulatory requirements, they need something, but they're looking at everything at a snapshot and achieving something that's right in front of them versus looking at that big picture. And that's where I think, the model of a virtual CISO is really to help them see that bigger picture. Farooq, when I look to you, is it the same on your side? Do you have, your group of institutions that, may not have seen something the way that you come in and then open their eyes to something that is, much broader or more risk-based, or is a different approach to maybe why they wanted to get engaged in the first place?
The short answer is yes. That is the very reason why they went for a virtual CISO. And I think I would second what Donna said, because I think it's not just about having a risk-based approach. It's coming up with a risk mitigation strategy which aligns with the organization culture, and the other things which come along with that. The other thing which I also want to add over here is that as a virtual CISO, and I'm sure Michael and Donna would have had the same experience, and I'm sure Michael Castro, you too, is about having conversations at the board level, at the executive management level. So one of the things that I helped most of these universities and college develop was an executive dashboard, and that talks to the point about having more visibility and having a more proactive approach. Because at the end of the day, I mean, a virtual CISO is not just about providing you advice when something goes wrong. It's about
Mhm.
helping you improve your security posture and making
Right.
sure that the board has better visibility of that, and making sure
Right.
that there's enough awareness at the board level too. Because I mean, a CISO needs resources not
Mhm.
just after the breach, but way before the breach happens, right? Just to make sure that they're able to minimize the effect. So I think virtual CISOs are helping with that conversation. And I've heard that from many virtual CISOs that they have actually helped CIOs and CISOs and the executive management present a better case in front of the board to make sure that they get the right resources. So,
Mhm.
and I think that in turn leads to better security governance and having a better security posture.
Yeah, that's what our quarterly report is, right? So making sure that we have that trending report to the board on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, definitely. It's part of painting that picture, right? And seeing where that, time over time value and improvement happens, right? It's not about fighting a fire in one spot. It's about, consistently helping that organization reduce that risk and become more resilient, right? As we know, cyber threats will always be upon us, no matter what organization, big or small. We're all looking to assist. But there has to be that continuous improvement model, and I think everyone, I see all the nods in the panel, where
Mhm.
we're all kind of in that a space of improving. So that leads me, I guess, Michael, I'm going to start with you. Like
Yeah.
the emergence of the virtual CISO, has it hasn't happened overnight, but it's not a 20-year model either. It really is something that is fairly new, and
Mhm.
really gained some traction in the US, and then happened here in Canada. It's been a little slower, but growing steadily.
Yeah.
Where do you see the virtual CISO role? Where do you see how the virtual CISO market or model really being down the road, say 5 years or 10 years from now?
Yeah. So I'm going to say that I'm heavily invested in this question. So, um, I was a CISO before CISO was a thing. 25, 30 years ago, CISO was not really, we didn't even have that title. We were just part of the cybersecurity team, and so that role grew out. And now, probably about 5, 6 years ago, the virtual CISO thing started, and so some of us, came started in along that same time frame. I think as this grows, people are going to see us more like, when you need legal advice, to go to a lawyer. When you need financial advice, to go to an accountant, right? And there's a retainer service, and then you can, if you're a bigger business, you can book them on a regular basis so that they're constantly giving you advice throughout the quarter. I see us being in that same position where when small businesses require cybersecurity advice, and they require, their quarterly reports and their annual reports and whatever, they will have a place they know where they can go to.
Fantastic. Donna, what about you? What do you see in the magic crystal ball of the virtual world of a CISO?
I think we'll start seeing some more standardization for how to pick a virtual CISO. So let's say, I saw a question in the chat come up about non-disclosure agreements,
Yeah.
about background checks, about credential checks. So rather than just who do I know, there's going to be, I think, some more best practice recommendations for how do you pick the right one for you. Then there's, some organizations, they need a particular subject matter expertise is really the heart and soul of what their program is all about. And then the other risks, maybe they don't need. And then there's others that might be more compliance driven. So really trying to find the right skill set mix, I think, is going to be important for companies and how you pick your virtual CISO, and what other skills they'll need to supplement, because no one really knows everything about everything, and how our company is going to feel when they need another opinion or another skill set that maybe their virtual CISO is lacking. So I think that is going to be one of the challenges that the companies are going to. And then the other thing I hope that we will see more of is, because of the number of IoT devices growing, and the lousy user interfaces that home like firewalls and stuff have, we're going to have to find a better way and show more visibility of how IoT devices and in a zero trust type of environment, how we can really get more visibility and management over our endpoints. Right now, I don't think there's a lot of tools really made for very small businesses. There are some, but you're either kind of desktop kind of client focused, or to get to more of a cloud solution is kind of a major investment, because you have to not only buy the tool, buy the subscription, but then hire the team to manage that and to watch it 24/7. I think we'll see more services around, small and medium businesses that are going to be more affordable, hopefully, for smaller companies.
Fantastic. So I see some questions coming in. I want to save the last 10, 15 minutes to kind of handle some of the questions, and they're fantastic ones. But before we get to that, I want to do a round table. Farooq, I'm going to start with you, and then Michael, and then Donna. So, from the concepts of your history and your stories of being a virtual CISO, and I'm going to abstain from this conversation as much as it sounds fun. Tell me really, what is one great story? And again, we're not going to mention any clients or any particular names, but what has been a really great story, whether it's been the best scenario, the strangest scenario, the most lopsided scenario? Give us a quick story, and I'll kind of limit you to 60, 90 seconds each, that you want to share with the group here on this call.
Yeah, one of the stories which I often share with people was that when I started my job at Orion as a shared CISO, I think it was the 11th day after that when the world experienced the WannaCry ransomware. So, I got a call from one of my friends who was a CISO for one of the healthcare organizations in United Kingdom, which was servicing NHS, and he shared intel about what NHS was going through. So I shared that intel with the universities I was working with, which were also serving as research, which were also working with some research hospitals. So that intel which I was able to share with these guys was timely, and they were able to take action in the right amount of time. And we all know that Ontario did not experience what some countries in Europe or North America experienced. So I think providing timely advice which can help prevent a security incident, or perhaps can help in responding to a security incident, is where a CISO can bring in the actual value.
Fantastic.
That's just one of the stories, but I just wanted to share this.
Oh, that's a great one. Michael, what about you?
Yep. So I'm going to say that most of my business is driven through a company's already been breached, already been ransomwared. They've got a requirement to fill out a due diligence with their insurer, or they're in a merger and acquisition scenario. And so all of these are great opportunities to go in, show them what you can do up front very, very quickly, and show them what putting a program in place gives them, or the opportunity that they get out of it. And we are typically an order of magnitude cheaper than that first breach.
Well put. Thank you. Donna, what about you?
Well, I guess I've got a client that I'm working with now that they are developing some software that touches some critical infrastructure type of clients. So in order for him to overcome barriers to sale, he's getting a lot of questions around his security program. So we're going through and documenting really all of the security features and protections and processes and schematics and diagrams of how his software is developed, so that he's got answers now. And he just closed a sale just based on the documentation we were able to provide him. And he said they had the least read on his contract markup of any that he's ever been through. So he's just thrilled to death. So I see that as a differentiator, especially when it comes to code development. I get approached all the time from people saying, hey, we'll develop your website. We'll do you know anyone we can write your software for you? And it all gets down to that. Well, can you tell me about your security program? Because I sure can't refer you to anybody unless I know that you're going to develop secure code for them. And people don't have answers, for that. So just being able to show you've got your security program together is a real differentiator for your sales and your revenue growth.
Yeah, I think we all have clients that have different motivations to bring someone, from a virtual CISO into place. And, it's always great to hear those success stories and what really compels them and what they then see as that value. And, that has been great from hearing from all of you on that. I'm going to go over to our questions. Because I think they're great, and that I would love to hear everyone on the panel's kind of answers to these. Of course, we have various different people watching right now. We have those that might be interested in bringing a virtual CISO into their organization. We also have those that are going to be on watching this panel that are interested in is being a vCISO a possible model for me. So our first question in our brought forward from our audience today is about NDAs. So of course, having a non-disclosure agreement, really having that legalese in place is so important. How do you, and Michael, I'm going to start with you, and then Farooq and Donna, how do you handle an NDA, especially with an organization that, might be, in the same sector as you, whether it be a security or another IT organization? How do you handle NDAs, Michael?
Sure. And I mean, this is the same as any advisor. So if we were, a corporate advisor, KPMG or Deloitte, it's the same thing. They advise companies that are in the same industries. We just got to make sure that the non-disclosure is specific, that they understand that we have other clients that are in that industry, and that any conversation or any documentation material between us is confidential.
Okay, Farooq?
Yeah,
Or
I'm sorry.
Donna, go ahead. So Donna, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, a virtual CISO should have a credential, should be, ISC squared or ISACA or EC Council, and there's a code of ethics behind that. So in order to maintain your professional credentials, you have to maintain your code of ethics, and avoiding a conflict of interest is a big one. So you should not accept any client that you believe that you're going to have a conflict of interest. Now, if it's within the same industry and they're not direct competitors, you just kind of have to, make sure that the client, you're transparent with your client to say, well, I have a client that's producing this other product. Is there any overlap? And figure that out beforehand. But, you're going to be privy to very, sensitive information and risks, and, really where the beating heart of the company is. And you do want to get that, signed off. I mean, I feel like it protects the client. It also protects me too. I ask my clients to sign a non-disclosure on my side, because I've put a lot of work into my models and into my methodologies, to my policies, and I don't want that out. I don't want my other customers disclosed, to anyone else. I don't want my pricing models, disclosed to other people without my permission, or even my company name. So even though there's no, even though nothing is 100%, even if you get a virtual CISO to help you with your program, there could still be a breach, and you don't want your name dragged through the mud either. Well, Donna messed up, or whoever messed up, and that's why we had this breach. Well, there's no guarantee. So an NDA is as important for the client as it is for the virtual CISO.
Now, Farooq, you definitely have a bunch of clients who are in the same sector, and it must be so compelling, although again, non-ethical. By no means am I saying you're doing this, but it must be sometimes hard to not slip in the, oh, but this institution is doing this. Oh, they did this, and they've got this problem. You know, how are that working? Is that NDA kind of part of your model as well?
Yes. So we just don't have one NDA. We have got at least two types of NDA. So we have like a regular NDA that is part of our agreement with each institution. And then we have a multi-party NDA, because the model that we run is a shared CISO model amongst, and we do share information amongst institutions. And we're dealing with all public sector institutions, because in Canada, universities and colleges are completely public sector. So we're dealing with legislations like FIPA, which is about freedom of information too. So we have to be really careful in terms of how that NDA is shaped up and what information is shared, and is that information, can that information be requested under FIPA if I've provided any advice or something. So we have got like a a lawyer on retainer who's helping us out with that. And at times it does become a challenge when you have a multi-party NDA on which legal counsel of various universities are also commenting on. So it took us lots of time to come up with a multi-party NDA which everybody agrees to. So, and we have to be really careful in terms of what information we are sharing amongst institutions. And since we're dealing with public sector, we have to make sure that we are adhering with the right principles. Apart from that, we also share intelligence amongst these institutions. So we follow the traffic light protocol too. So just making sure that everybody is following the same protocol and everything.
Right.
And there's, yeah.
Right. Donna, this one, I'm going to start with you on this one, and then I'm going to go over to you, Michael, on the next question. And it's about insurance and liability. So Donna, you touched on it a bit at the beginning in terms of the liability, but what kind of risk or liability insurance is kind of the right model for a virtual CISO to have in order to protect themselves in the model of being a vCISO?
So, yeah, I do carry just general liability insurance. And then as part of that, there's a cyber liability portion to it. So they ask questions about, what type of protections you have. Do you have it's just like any other company, going through the questionnaire of, do you use encryption? Do you use this? Do you use, you have protections against it, and you have to kind of explain all that stuff. So it does cover it. I think the tricky thing you have to look for in liability insurance is if any of your subcontractors are covered by your policy. So it's,
Right.
I think it's called subrogation. If that covers your subcontractors, so you do want to make sure that that's in there.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Michael?
Errors and omissions.
Errors and omissions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is a key thing, right? E&O insurance is very important, and, I think it's like anything, I think everyone who's considering being a vCISO or anyone who's already out there has to, no different than carrying insurance for other things, whether it be your automobile or your house, that has to be part of your belt of tools that you have, maybe not customer facing, but definitely, part of what you need to be a successful virtual CISO.
Yeah, and we can kind of expand that question like we were talking about before of what should you look for. So definitely look to make sure that they have a cyber liability insurance policy and that they will provide a certificate of insurance to
Right.
your company. Are they registered with the Secretary of State or a department, as a valid corporation, or is this somebody who, I know cybersecurity and I'm going to do this on the side?
Right.
Are they a real company, or is this just somebody who's doing this as a side business? You do want to have somebody who's serious, and is going to be able to have that insurance policy to cover you. Then there's other background screening. Of, do you need them to take a drug test, or are there other requirements, or how are they going to submit to your background check, or what will you accept in terms of a background check? So I think that's a valid question to ask your virtual CISO. Are their credentials up to date? Have they expired? Like I said, we were talking before about, you should be bound to that code of ethics and in good standard with whatever your certification body is for your professional credentials and make sure that you are receiving continuum training and that their knowledge is not, from the 1990s in security, and they don't know any of the newer technologies. That's definitely, I think, something to look for.
Great.
Michael or Farooq, if you have other suggestions of what you think is
Dating my
important.
1990s education.
Yes.
Client server
My list was very
guy.
short in the 90s, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Hey, Farooq, I'm gonna look to you for this last question. And part of it, remember we talked or we mentioned earlier in our discussion today about having the capability and the skill set to jump in and take your years of expertise to be able to hit a challenge face on. So that's great that a virtual CISO can do that from an expertise level. But one of the questions we have is that to be able to assist organizations, you have to be able to understand that organization, especially with the operations of that organization and definitely with the culture. So, do you see that as a challenge, really for you or for a virtual CISO in general, to be able to get up to speed and adapting to the way of one particular organization, or the many that you have and you're assisting, because each one can be different. Is that a challenge?
Yes, it surely is a challenge. Tell me.
Elaborate.
Yeah. So it is a challenge. And the reason for that is that every organization is unique in the way, first of all, their culture, but apart from that, in the level of maturity also. So, I mean, how mature, how cyber mature are they? What's the tone at the top? How do they treat cybersecurity issues? And this is a problem which cannot be solved overnight. And it takes time. And one of the things that I do to make sure that I do understand the culture is to make sure that I have conversations with the right stakeholders, having conversations with the CISOs, the IT teams, the executive management, and all that. And the reason for, and some of the common questions that are usually asked is that, okay, when was the last time you were audited? Okay, and if you were audited, how did you address your key observations? And perhaps that shows what's the level of commitment that organization has towards addressing security concerns. The second thing which I often talk to them is that, okay, do you have a list of your top 10 security risks? Do you share that with the executive management? How do you track them? And it's all about how do they see, what's their perception about security risks. For some people, security is an IT problem. For some, they don't even understand that security is an organization-wide subject. For some, it is like a corner for desk thing. So I think it's asking those questions. And because, if an organization does not have the right tone at the top for security, then they surely need to address their security culture. So I think asking the right questions and having that conversation, and also at the same time empathizing with them, because we're dealing with public sector folks and who have a full-time day job in which they are already busy with. So they don't, so dealing with some people who don't even care about security. So making sure that we understand the situation and making sure that they are able to understand the effects of not addressing cybersecurity risks or issues.
Great. Panelists, we're almost at the top of the hour here. And so we're going to wrap up. I want to take this opportunity to thank personally Michael, Donna, and Farooq. This has been a great conversation on virtual CISOs. As all of us as being members of this group, I think it's great with what we've heard today and what we've discussed. And I hope it lends well to the audience in terms of those that I mentioned might be considering whether a vCISO is the right model for them, or for those that are considering whether being a vCISO or potentially looking at that model works out for them. So on behalf of CyberX, I want to thank all of you for participating in today's event. I look forward, and all of us are available on the portal. If there are any questions, I'm sure I can say for everyone here that please feel free to reach out to any or all of us. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. And thanks for being part of CyberX.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you,
all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Farooq.